There are only 3 people who know what really happened to me in the mountains of western Montana. One is the park ranger who found me. The second is the detective who interviewed me for nearly 6 hours after I got out of the hospital. And the third is me. I stayed silent for almost 2 years because every time I tried to explain what happened, people either laughed or assumed the isolation had affected my mind. Maybe they're right. Maybe spending 3 nights alone in one of America's largest national forests broke something inside me. But every now and then, I still wake up at exactly 3:17 in the morning because I hear someone slowly walking around my bedroom. The footsteps always stop outside my door, and every time I force myself to open it, no one's there. Maybe it's just trauma. Or maybe whatever followed me out of those woods never actually left. If you're planning to camp alone this summer, don't make the same mistake I did. Because everything I'm about to tell you really happened to me. Or at least, that's what I still believe. My name is Ethan. I was 29 years old when this happened. At the time, I worked as a freelance photographer in Seattle. Most of my clients wanted landscapes, wildlife, and drone footage of remote places. After spending months stuck behind a computer editing thousands of photos, I decided I needed a break. No deadlines, no phone calls, no internet. Just me, my camera, and 3 days surrounded by nature. I spent nearly 2 weeks researching places before choosing a remote camping area in western Montana. It wasn't one of the famous tourist campgrounds. It was an older backcountry trail that required hikers to carry everything on their backs. Exactly what I wanted. Peace, silence, the kind of place where your phone loses signal within minutes. Before leaving, I mapped the trail, downloaded offline GPS maps, packed enough food for 4 days, filled 2 water filtration bottles, and double-checked every piece of gear. I wasn't inexperienced. I'd been camping since college. I'd slept in deserts, mountains, and forests across several states. Nothing about this trip felt dangerous. If anything, I felt over-prepared. The drive from Seattle took nearly 10 hours. By the time I reached the ranger station, the afternoon sun had begun to disappear behind the mountains. The station itself looked older than I expected. Weathered wooden walls, a faded American flag, an old pickup truck parked outside. Inside sat a ranger who looked to be in his late 60s. Gray beard, sunburned face, eyes that looked permanently exhausted. He greeted me with a smile. "Camping alone?" I nodded. 3 nights. He studied my permit before looking back at me. "Trail 7. "Yeah." His smile disappeared. He remained silent for a few seconds. Then he leaned closer. "You can still change your reservation." I laughed. Why would I? Instead of answering immediately, he looked out the dusty window toward the forest. Finally, he said quietly, "Because people don't stay on Trail 7 anymore." I assumed he was joking. "What? Bears?" He slowly shook his head. "No." "Mountain lions?" Again. "No." I waited. He didn't continue. "So, what's the problem?" He sighed. "I've worked here 34 years. I've seen grizzlies chase people. I've rescued hikers after avalanches. I've carried bodies off cliffs. But Trail 7." He stopped speaking again. "That trail has a habit of making people leave early." I couldn't help smiling. It sounded like one of those local legends meant to scare tourists. "I'm sure I'll be okay." He stared at me for another few seconds before reaching beneath the counter. He placed a folded paper map beside my permit. "I know you already have GPS, but keep this." I thanked him. As I turned to leave, he said something that didn't seem important at the time. "If you hear someone calling your name after dark..." I looked back. "Don't answer. I laughed politely. He didn't. For the first time that day, I noticed he wasn't smiling. The trail began only half a mile beyond the ranger station. The first 2 hours were beautiful. Tall pine trees stretched toward the sky. The air smelled fresh after a light morning rain. Birds filled the forest with constant chatter. Every few minutes, I'd stop to photograph wildflowers, deer tracks, or sunlight breaking through the trees. Exactly the peaceful trip I'd imagined. Around sunset, I reached a clearing beside a narrow creek. Perfect campsite, flat ground, fresh water, enough open sky for photography. I pitched my tent, gathered firewood, cooked a simple meal, and watched the stars slowly appear overhead. There wasn't another camper for miles. Honestly, it felt incredible. No traffic, no city lights, no notifications, just complete silence. Or, at least that's what I thought. Because around 10:30 that night I heard something. It wasn't loud. It sounded like someone taking one slow step through dry leaves. Crunch. Then silence. I looked toward the trees. Nothing. Probably a deer. A raccoon. Maybe even a bear. Wildlife makes noise. That's normal. I climbed into my sleeping bag and turned off my lantern. 5 minutes passed, then crunch. This time, it sounded closer. I slowly unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. The moonlight illuminated the clearing. The creek reflected silver beneath the stars. My backpack still leaned against the same tree. Everything looked perfectly normal, until I noticed something that definitely hadn't been there before. At the edge of my campsite, just beyond the fire pit, someone had placed a single camping chair. It wasn't mine, and when I went to bed, I was absolutely certain there hadn't been anyone else in that clearing. I knew that because I'd walked around the campsite before climbing into my tent. There was nothing near the fire except my backpack and a pile of firewood. Now, a faded green folding chair sat perfectly upright near the edge of the clearing. It wasn't broken. It wasn't dirt. It looked almost new. Whoever left it there hadn't made a sound. I stared at it for nearly a minute, waiting for someone to step out of the trees and laugh. Nothing happened. The forest was completely still. Not a single branch moved. Not a single voice. Just that chair, facing directly toward my tent. For the first time that night, I didn't feel alone anymore. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe another camper had wandered into the wrong campsite. Maybe they'd accidentally left it behind. That made sense. Until I remembered something. I hadn't seen another vehicle since leaving the ranger station. Not one. And according to the trail map, the nearest campsite was over 3 miles away. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The cold air hit immediately. Everything looked exactly the same. The tent, the creek, the fire, the chair. I slowly walked toward it. Every step sounded impossibly loud against the silence. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The chair wasn't wet. That was impossible. Everything else around it was covered in dew. The grass shimmered beneath the moonlight. The firewood was damp. Even my backpack had tiny drops of moisture on it. But the chair, it was completely dry, as if someone had placed it there only seconds ago. I reached out and touched the backrest. It was warm. Not just warm. It felt like someone had been sitting there moments earlier. Every instinct told me to leave it alone. Instead, I slowly turned the chair around. The moment it faced the forest, I heard it crunch. One single footstep from somewhere deep between the trees. The sound came only once. Crunch. Then, nothing. I stood completely still, staring into the darkness beyond the tree line. The forest wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt like everything inside it had stopped moving. No wind, no insects. Not even the creek seemed as loud as it had a minute earlier. I waited. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Still. I picked up the chair again. This time, I looked underneath it. Nothing. No name. No campground sticker. No dirt. Not even a scratch. It looked like it had come straight out of a store, which made even less sense, because there wasn't a single tire track anywhere near my campsite. I turned my flashlight toward the trees. The beam reached maybe 50 feet, then disappeared into darkness. That's when I noticed something strange. The fog wasn't moving anymore. It hung perfectly still between the trees, almost like it was waiting. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity, maybe pride. But instead of going back into my tent, I took 3 slow steps toward the forest. The temperature dropped immediately. It wasn't gradual. It felt like walking into an open freezer. Every breath became visible, even though it hadn't been cold all evening. Then, I smelled smoke. Not from my campfire. This was different. Old, heavy, like wet wood burning somewhere deep in the forest. I looked around. My fire was almost out. The smoke wasn't coming from my campsite. It was coming from somewhere ahead. I followed the smell for maybe 20 yards. Then my flashlight landed on something that made my stomach drop. Another campsite, hidden between the trees. The fire pit was cold. The tent had collapsed. Camping gear was scattered everywhere. It looked like someone had left in a hurry, or never left at all. I stood there for several seconds, unable to move. The campsite looked like someone had abandoned it in the middle of dinner. A black cooking pot still rested above the fire pit. An unopened can of soup lay beside a log. A flashlight was lying on the ground, still pointing toward the trees. Nothing had been packed. Nothing had been cleaned. It looked as if whoever stayed here had simply disappeared. Then I noticed something that didn't belong. Every zipper on the tent had been left open, not torn, not broken, opened, one by one, almost as if someone wanted whoever was inside to leave as quickly as possible. I swept my flashlight across the ground. That's when I saw the footprints. There were dozens of them. Some led into the trees. None came back. I checked twice, then a third time. Every trail disappeared into the forest. Not a single set returned to the campsite. The ranger's warning suddenly came back to me. If you hear someone calling your name after dark, don't answer. I hadn't heard my name. Not yet. But standing there, for the first time, I realized he hadn't been trying to scare me. He'd been trying to save me. Then, a voice, barely louder than a whisper. Ethan. It came from somewhere beyond the trees. Soft, calm, almost familiar. Every muscle in my body froze because I hadn't told anyone my name since arriving here. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Ethan." I wanted to answer. I don't know why. It felt natural, like hearing the voice of someone I'd known my entire life. Then I remembered the ranger's warning. I covered my mouth, held my breath, and somewhere in the darkness, something laughed. I don't know how long I stood there after hearing that laugh. It couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds, but it felt like an entire minute. The forest was silent again. Not peaceful. Silent. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something is listening instead of breathing. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't spending another minute away from my campsite. I turned around. The path back should have been easy. 20 yards. Maybe 30. But after only a few steps, I couldn't see my own campsite anymore. The trees looked different. The rocks looked different. Even the creek had gone completely silent. I stopped walking. Every direction looked exactly the same. Panic finally hit me. I pulled out my GPS. The screen lit up. Searching. 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 No signal. I opened the offline trail map. The blue location marker kept jumping. First north, then west, then somewhere I knew was impossible. It was as if the GPS couldn't decide where I was. Then, crunch. Behind me. I didn't turn around. Every instinct told me not to. Another step. Closer. Crunch. Then another. Slow. Steady. Like someone was matching my breathing. I started walking. The footsteps started walking too. I walked faster. The footsteps matched me. I stopped. They stopped. I took one slow step. One slow step answered me. I wasn't imagining it anymore. Whatever was behind me didn't want to pass me. It wanted to stay exactly where it was. Just behind me. I couldn't take it anymore. I spun around and pointed my flashlight straight into the trees. Nothing. No animal. No person. No movement. Just hundreds of pine trees standing perfectly still. Then, my flashlight flickered once, twice, and went completely dark. The flashlight was dead. I hit it against my palm. Nothing. Again, nothing. For the first time that night, I was standing in complete darkness. The moon had disappeared behind thick clouds. The only thing I could hear was my own breathing. Then, crunch. One slow footstep, somewhere behind me. I didn't wait to hear another one. I ran. Branches slammed against each other above me. Loose rocks rolled beneath my boots. I couldn't see the trail anymore. I wasn't running toward safety. I was simply running away from whatever had been following me. Then, a faint orange light, barely visible through the trees. For one terrible second, I thought it was another campsite. But as I got closer, I recognized it. My campfire. I had somehow made it back. I didn't stop. I threw everything into my backpack without even looking. I left almost everything behind. The cooking pot, the extra food, even my camera. None of it mattered anymore. The only thing I wanted was the parking lot, the ranger station, another human being. I don't remember how long I ran. Eventually, the trees began to thin. Then I saw it. The wooden Trail 7 sign. Just beyond it, the ranger station. Its porch light was still on. I had never been happier to see a single light in my life. The ranger didn't ask what happened. He looked at me, then looked at my empty hands. "You answered it?" I shook my head. "No." He nodded once. "Good." Then he asked me one question I'll never forget. "Did it laugh?" I couldn't speak, because I'd never told him that part. Not once. I left Montana before sunrise. I never went back to Trail 7. But every year, on the same night, at exactly 3:17 in the morning, I wake up to the sound of one slow footstep, stopping just outside my bedroom door.